coming on the air with a whole bunch of red on Wall Street, with tech stocks driving numbers down, Bitcoin losing half its value. So what's not falling? The price of gas, food, loans, everything. Up ahead, why the Fed thinks more rate hikes this week could actually save us money. Plus, we're hearing directly from one of former President Trump's closest advisors, suggesting Mr. Trump knew he lost the election and pushed lies about fraud anyway. All of it as the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, says he's watching these hearings. We're going to break down why that's important and how the January 6th committee is trying to draw this line from the big lie right to the Capitol attack. Also on Capitol Hill, senators applauding a new framework for a potential gun bill, but some lawmakers hoping it's on the president's desk by the end of July. Why the pressure's on now to make sure Republicans don't jump ship. Plus, the heat is on across the country, literally, as there's now this new push to name heat waves, just like we do for hurricanes. That's in tonight's original. And Google denying a top engineer's claims that the company's new artificial intelligence can actually feel emotions, just like you and me. He's now on administrative leave. Why he says this AI has a soul. Yeah, we got that later in the show. Hey, I'm Hallie. So listen, not the most fun start to the week if you own stocks or drive a car or buy things. So pretty much all of us start with stocks, right? Because they took a dive again today, with investors even more worried that rising inflation could tip the economy into a recession. This is the board. The Dow down, look at that, 876 points. The S&P actually hit bear territory. That means it's down 20% from the high that it hit in January. And you knew this was going to happen. Gas prices now above $5 a gallon. National average. We hit that milestone, if you will, over the weekend. It's now $5.01 across the country, a new record high, up $2 from a year ago, expected to get to $6 by Labor Day. And as prices go up, the Fed's expected to announce another half-point interest rate hike on Wednesday, trying to fight inflation that's the highest it's been in 40 years. So, yeah, that could help. But it could also make the rates you pay on your credit cards or even certain home loans that much more expensive. Kate Rogers is joining us now to talk about all of this. Kate, we're glad to have you with us. Start with the market, start with the Fed. How do we put into context what we saw today in the markets and what we should expect as we look ahead of this Fed meeting Wednesday?
Yeah, Hallie, good to be here. A lot of volatility over and ahead of this Fed meeting on Wednesday, because there's a long-held belief that higher interest rates will help to control inflation. But how quickly that can happen and whether it'll work or not is part of the reason you're seeing a lot of the volatility we've been experiencing. So if you take a look at this chart, it's the CBO's projections that high inflation will persist throughout the year. The PCE, or Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, will be at 4.0 this year, which is elevated. Now, the Fed's higher rates would make borrowing less appealing and more expensive to people, so that slows demand down to catch up with supply, which, remember, has been an issue throughout the pandemic. And if there's less demand, you could see more discounting on the retailer side to get consumers in the door buying those products. But then there's also a concern that if you go too quickly with these hikes, there could be more damage to the economy, which is, again, behind a lot of the market volatility we've been seeing over the past few days and weeks.
So the other piece of this, too, you talk about volatility, fine, in the markets. What about stuff like gas prices, right? Record highs, but the job market's really hot. And it seems like that low unemployment rate is a critical piece of the economic picture. If, in fact, we do hit a recession, what does that mean for the labor market?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if consumers pull back and spend less, we'll be in a very different spending environment than we're in today. You're even starting to hear executives like Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, and that company's doing well, remember, warning that American families cannot keep spending the way that they are right now because of inflation. Companies today are still looking for workers, particularly in certain sectors. I cover the restaurant industry for us, so that's one place that workers are still very much needed. But if there's a pullback and less demand, those workers may not be needed. We're also seeing that slip a bit. For example, weekly jobless claims last week hit the highest levels we've seen since mid-January. But there's also a fear, to bring it back to the Fed, that if they raise too much too fast, that could have negative impacts on the economy. For example, you could see wages go down, which would also be a bad thing.
We talk a lot about crypto on this show, about Bitcoin, about this currency. It is taking a real hit today. Explain why this is significant. Explain how we should be looking at this and reading into it.
Yeah, so some investors see Bitcoin as a riskier investment, and you mentioned it fell below 23,000 today, closed just above that, but that was the lowest level we've seen since December of 2020. Over the weekend and into Monday morning, more than $200 billion had been wiped off the entire cryptocurrency market, a huge number. Meanwhile, there was also this crypto lending company called Celsius that paused withdrawals for its customers, so that kind of sparked even more fears of contagion into the broader crypto market. And there are also macro factors we're seeing, like inflation, you mentioned, the broader market volatility, et cetera, kind of feeding into the drop in Bitcoin as well, because investors seem to be pulling their money from everywhere these days.
Kate,
back over to you.
Good to have that breakdown, Kate. Really appreciate you being with us. Thanks. In Washington today, the January 6th committee zeroing in on how the so-called big lie about the 2020 election got its start, who knew it was a lie, and why that matters as they try to connect the dots back to former President Trump to make this argument that he was at the center of an attempted coup to overthrow the legitimate election results. So here's the case they're making. First, that the former president knew he lost. Second, that he ignored advice from a ton of people in his inner circle not to go out and say he won prematurely. And three, that he decided to push a bunch of lies about fraud anyway. And so to make that case, the committee is using the words of those closest to the former president, like his former Attorney General, Bill Barr.
I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bull. I thought, boy, if he really believes this stuff, he has, lost contact with he's become detached from reality. There was never an indication of interest in what the actual facts were.
Now, the marquee witness was supposed to be Mr. Trump's ex-campaign manager, Bill Stepien. But, hashtag timing, his wife went into labor. He apparently was in Washington this morning. He was ready to go. Obviously, that took precedence. He flew back for that. So instead, the panel used pieces of his deposition, which had been videotaped. And in those comments, Stepien laid out that there seemed to be basically two teams trying to get the former president's ear. One team that was pushing this so-called big lie. The other one, the one that Stepien was on, which was not.
I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal, as reporters, kind of started to do around that point in time. I built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest and professional. And I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time.
So instead, the former president relied on folks like this guy, Rudy Giuliani, his personal attorney, who was pushing him to get out there and say, hey, the election was stolen. Both Stepien and Trump advisor Jason Miller testified Giuliani was intoxicated, was basically drunk on election night. Within just the last couple of minutes, actually, as we've been sitting on set here, Giuliani's lawyer is telling NBC that was not true. And these conspiracies that Rudy Giuliani was talking about were, in the words of ex-White House lawyer Eric Hirschman, frankly, nuts.
The theory was also completely nuts. Right? It was a combination of Italians, Germans. Different things have been floating around as to who was involved. I remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan. She has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, it's something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
We've got Hallie Vitale and Kristen Welker here to break this down. Hallie, let me start with you on Capitol Hill, because the whole point of today's hearing, as you well know, this is hearing number 2 in the 7-hearing sequence. And it was to underscore this is where the big lie, so-called big lie, came from, these lies about election fraud. And this is what is linked then to January 6th, because as they played a little bit of in the hearing, you heard some of these insurrectionists, if you will, repeating the very same claims of election fraud that the committee was trying to prove Donald Trump knew were not accurate, was not correct.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that was the central focus of this. It was striking during the first primetime hearing to see the way that they devoted so much time to speaking to former President Donald Trump's mindset in the weeks before January 6th. Today, that was the entire focus, establishing for the audience that he knew, despite his advisors telling him that he hadn't won the election, wouldn't win the election, that all of these instances of whack-a-mole voter fraud that he was trying to allege, that they were unfounded. counted. It's what we were reporting at the time, but now we know that the former president was being told that by members of his own campaign who were paid in many ways to find the things that he was looking for and absolutely could not. Now, of course, you have the president's mindset, and it seems like the committee is going to build from there, but they also made that important connection today of the president using his words and the ways that that informed his supporters coming here to the Capitol on January 6th, really making that link concretely. It's something that committee members mentioned to me after the fact, that they really wanted to draw that through line, the impact effectively that words matter, and the words that the president was using in the aftermath of the election were then being parroted by the very people who were upset, who felt that their votes weren't counted, and who felt that the election was stolen because of what the president was saying throughout the course of the month of November, December, and January.
They also laid out some breadcrumbs of the potential for looking at finances specifically, with one of the members of the committee saying the big lie was actually the big ripoff, pointing to fundraising that had been done that the committee says was never spent on this defense fund to defend against ultimately failed claims that the election had been stolen here. That feels to me, and I think to others who are watching, that felt like a new door being opened here by the committee for potentially something else that there might be some liability on.
Yeah, it kind of felt like a little bit of an Easter egg, because when you think about the minutes that were dedicated to that, compared to the entirety of the hearing, it wasn't a ton of time, but it's definitely a breadcrumb that we're going to see the committee continue to follow. You know, I was struck by the fact that one of the committee's counsel that was sitting up on the dais next to Congresswoman Lofgren is someone who has a deep background in financial securities and all of these different kinds of financial cases through the Treasury Department and in other entities in her career. Clearly, that's kind of like the follow the money kind of resume that you would want if you ended up looking into how this money was spent. So it's something that we definitely heard from committee members as they were leaving the room. They want to hear more about. But I also think that it's important because, of course, none of this happens in a vacuum, and we'll talk about the Department of Justice. But there's the possibility that this looks a lot like what Steve Bannon was eventually was looked into for, with the way that he was raising money, saying that it was for, in the Bannon case, building the wall, when in fact the money was used for something else. That's kind of what they're saying happened here regarding the legal defense fund and the way that it was actually used.
Real quick, Hallie, you mentioned the Department of Justice. We heard from Attorney General Merrick Garland today, by the way, talking about something totally unrelated, saying, yeah, I am watching all these hearings. Basically, and I'm paraphrasing, saying, you better bet that we are all watching all of these hearings, basically. You talk with Congressman Adam Schiff, actually, about whether or not he wants the DOJ to pursue any charges. I spoke with Congressman Raskin, another member, who wouldn't go there, right? He said, all we're doing is laying out the facts. Like, we can only, make the dinner plate and then serve it. We can't force them to eat it. That was generally what he was trying to say. I'm wondering what the congressman said to you.
Yeah, the congressman that I spoke to also isn't forcing anyone to eat anything on the dinner plate. They're just serving it up and cooking it up for him. That being said, he was more explicit, certainly than Raskin, and than most of the members that I've heard. Listen.
I think the Justice Department should be investigating anyone, including former presidents, if there is credible evidence that they engage in criminal activity.
And the question that he's answering there, Hallie, I said, I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. Do you think the Department of Justice should investigate the former president if you guys are able to put out enough evidence that says that he needs to be accountable here? That is a very clear answer that he gave right there. Other committee members have shied away from it, but certainly Schiff is not, and that's pretty notable.
I think that's interesting, worth noting, and I'm glad you did, Ali Vitale, covering it all for us today on Capitol Hill. I have with me here on set my friend and the inimitable Kristen Welker. Hi, our chief White House correspondent, who was with us today for special coverage. Exactly, on the network. So a couple things here. First of all, one of the points that I think is important to make, we mentioned inebriated Rudy Giuliani at the top, right? I think the committee was pointing this out not to suggest something salacious, gossipy. They're trying to make the point that this is a former president who is listening to somebody who was apparently inebriated on election night to get out there, say you declared victory, even though you didn't, versus the avalanche of people, Bill Stepien, Jason Miller, others who are saying, no, Jared Kushner, by the way, who said, no. In that night and the night after, don't go there. Now, Giuliani's attorney says, no, not true. Worth noting, they say he was not intoxicated on election night. Talk to me about what you think the most important thing is our viewers need to be thinking about as we look ahead to the next hearing.
Well, I think you touch on one of them, Hallie, which is this chorus of voices that we're all saying the same thing. Bill Stepien saying, don't go out and declare victory tonight. Give this time. The votes are still being counted. you raise Jared Kushner. And I think one of the most notable things about these hearings that you and I have talked about, to hear from Jared Kushner, to hear him say, I told him I don't think that he should be relying on Rudy Giuliani for legal counsel in this battle to try to overturn the results in these various states. By the way, that was a conversation that happened after election night. So whatever state Rudy Giuliani was in election night, we all saw that he moved in and really became the top person. And I think the committee is trying to connect the dots and to say there are so many people who were saying the same thing to former President Trump, that he was either willfully trying to ignore the reality that they laid out for him, or he knew that he had lost and decided to spread these mistruths despite that. Looking forward, we're going to be focused on the pressure campaign within the DOJ and the former vice president, Hallie. And we kind of had the groundwork for that laid today.
Before we get there, you know, you bring up something, which is the former Attorney General Bill Barr, for example, this question of the people around the former president saying these things aren't true. For Bill Barr to say something as extraordinary as, under oath in a deposition, I believe the former president to have been detached from reality. It is also worth noting Bill Barr's resignation letter, for example, in December of 2020 didn't say that, right? None of these folks came forward publicly if they had these concerns about how this was unfolding, as they now testify they did, to say anything.
Well, and I think that's one of the problematic things. These people are testifying, and yes, they were recorded, and now the world is getting to see what they said.
And some of them under threat of subpoena, by the way. Legal muscle put into this.
Exactly.
Too, right?
Very important point there. But saying these things after the fact, after January 6th, when, frankly, for some people, they would argue it was just too late, that they needed to say these truths much earlier, particularly in the case of former Attorney General Bill Barr, because, as you say, his resignation letter struck a very different tone. Now, he had that explosive conversation that he details with the former president, and his resignation when he says he quits. But again, what would the public have made of that if they knew all of the details at the time? I think that that is going to be significant. I do think it's very significant that the Attorney General, the current Attorney General, said that he's watching these proceedings very carefully. You have a number of committee members who say
he could have commented, by the way.
Exactly.
He could have said, I'm not going to get into it.
Absolutely.
He could have said that.
Absolutely. And officials do that all the time, as we know.
As you well know, especially.
We know. We
yes.
try to get them to talk, and they often don't. But here he said, yes, we're paying attention. I took note of that because over the weekend you had a number of committee members saying that they think they have the goods for a potential investigation by the Justice Department. Now, we will have to see if that comes to fruition, if the committee can connect all of the dots that they say they will. And again, I think Wednesday and Thursday are going to be very key, particularly Thursday, when we're going to see the committee delve into the pressure campaign against former Vice President Mike Pence.
Kristen Walker, it is such a pleasure to see you.
So
I know you're hustling back down to D.C.
I am.
We'll see you there tomorrow,
We'll be back and
friend.
forth. Yeah, have a good rest of the show. Good to see you.
Appreciate it. By the way, we just talked about it. NBC News Now Wednesday, right? Kristen talked about that. Our coverage of the January 6th hearing will pick up at 9:30 Eastern. Do not miss it. I'll be there with you. Kristen will be there. Lots of folks will be there. Let's stay in Washington now and what's happening at the Capitol, because over in the Senate, you got a lot of folks looking to the top Republican there, Mitch McConnell, and whether he will give the green light, his blessing, if you will, to this new bipartisan framework for a gun deal. He didn't say anything about it during his speech on the Senate floor not too long ago, but on his way off the floor did say he's hopeful something can get done before the July 4th recess. Again, we should stress right now that this is a deal. This is a framework for a bill. It's not actually yet a bill. It is still significant, and if it gets to where it needs to be, it would include more rigorous background checks for 18 to 21-year-olds, incentives for more states to put in place red flag laws, more funding for school safety and mental health services, addressing the boyfriend loophole, as it's called, in cases of domestic violence, and new penalties for straw purchases. That's when people have somebody else buy a gun for them because they can't pass a background check. So who has signed on to this? Everybody you see on your screen, 20 senators in all, including, and this is really important, the 10 Republicans you see on the right side of your screen. That means that this currently has enough support from Republicans to overcome a potential filibuster. In other words, we always talk about how it needs the 60-vote threshold. It looks like it has that unless any Democrats defect. Sahil Kapoor is joining us now. Let's stick on this vote, Sahil, because that's important. You could talk, until you're blue in the face about the potential for some kind of a gun deal, right? A gun package to change the nation's gun laws. But unless the right amount of senators get behind it, it doesn't go anywhere. So on the one hand, yes, they have enough Republicans. On the other hand, what do you make of Mitch McConnell not saying anything about it, for example, in his floor speech here? How does that group go and get his support, that of other Republican senators, and do they really need it?
I think they absolutely do need Mitch McConnell's sign off, at least his green light to move forward. If not him actively going out there and championing and promoting this bill. Now, he did not comment on that framework in his floor speech, as you mentioned, but after when he walked off the floor, I walked up to him and I asked him about that framework and whether he thinks a bill text could be written this week. And his response was, quote, "Looks like we're headed in the right direction," unquote. That was just to me. And those are positive vibes from Mitch McConnell. He would not be doing this if he didn't think they could ultimately get to an outcome that they could pass this bill and that Republican voters and activists would ultimately give lawmakers the space to do a modest deal. The key provisions here, the key thing to watch for, Hallie, is the drafting of the bill. It's very easy to sign your name on a framework. It's much harder to vote for a complicated piece of legislation that has far-reaching impacts. The two provisions I'm keeping my eyes on here are the federal firearms licensee requirements. That's been a thorny issue in the past. And the boyfriend loophole, also a complicated issue that the two parties have tried to negotiate and not been able to come to a deal. Now, sources tell me that they believe they can get to a deal this time. They believe they've had a breakthrough. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put it in the framework. But a framework is just a framework. I also talked to John Cornyn, the lead negotiator of this, and asked him, how solid are those 10 Republicans behind the framework? His response, rock solid.
Real quick, Sahil, there's plenty in the bill. We laid it out, right? And I don't want to underplay the significance of it, because if this passes, it would certainly be the most significant changes to the nation's gun laws in some time. What is not in the bill, though, for example, are some of these other measures that specifically Democrats had wanted to see. It doesn't ban semi-automatic weapons. That had been considered kind of a non-starter anyway. No ban on high-capacity magazines. But interestingly, also, no minimum age of 21 to buy an AR-15 style rifle. That had been something that had been kicked around a little bit, seemed to have lost oxygen fairly quickly. And here it is, ultimately not in this final package.
That's right, Hallie. Well, the bar has gotten so low for Democrats. They've tried and tried and tried to do something major on guns. They failed. They're now trying to do something very modest, very minor on guns that can win Republican support as a starting point. They're trying to keep two thoughts in their head at the same time. The first is, yes, this is a modest bill. This is not everything they want. And yes, regardless, it would still be the most significant piece of gun violence prevention legislation since 1996, since the so-called Lautenberg Amendment. So they believe ultimately that this will save lives. This will crack that long-standing kind of record of several decades going by where Congress does nothing about guns, and hopefully in the views of many Democrats, this will be a first step going forward. They're also particularly excited about the red flag provisions. They believe those are very significant. 19 states in the District of Columbia have them. They're not well implemented. They're not well understood. They want to broaden that number and improve that implementation. The background checks for in opening the door to juvenile records for 18 to 21-year-olds, that could be a big, big deal, Hallie, because a number of these recent mass shooters have been a part of that age group who have walked into a gun store and legally bought a weapon that, if their juvenile records were accessible to the background check system, would not have been able to buy it.
Sahil Kapoor, live for us on the Hill. Sahil, thanks. To Idaho now, where police there are saying a little while ago they had no idea that members of a white nationalist group had been planning to riot at a Pride event Saturday. The Coeur d'Alene police chief saying the people in this video that you see here are part of Patriot Front, that's the group. And officers were surprised to find them in a U-Haul getting ready to disrupt an annual LGBTQ plus event. Here's a look at all 31 men. They were arrested after a 911 call reporting a group dressed, according to the police chief. The caller said they were dressed like a little army getting into a moving truck. As of today, all of them have been released from custody so far. The Southern Poverty Law Center says the group that they're a part of, Patriot Front, is a hate group. The FBI, local, state officials were already at the event. They wanted to make sure things went safely. Gotti Schwartz is joining us now. And Gotti, police say this group was pretty prepared, period, right? They had shields, they had masks, they had a smoke grenade, but we still don't know more. I think there are still some unanswered questions about the extent of their intentions, no?
Yeah, and Hallie, at this point, it looks like by now all of these suspects have posted the $300 bond. They're out of jail, which is normal for a single count of conspiracy to commit a riot. But apparently, one of the key pieces of evidence in this case could actually be written out plans, almost military or law enforcement style plans that were found inside of that Utah that outline things like formations and how a smoke grenade would be used and how they would build up what they called a confrontational dynamic and then fall back to downtown Coeur d'Alene. So it's going to be hard for a defense attorney to argue that this was just a bunch of masked guys who just happened to have riot shields, who were all dressed the same, who were all in a U-Haul together to go to this peaceful protest, because again, there were written out plans. Hallie?
At the news conference that wrapped up not too long ago, the police chief said the U-Haul was stopped less than a quarter mile from where this Pride thing was happening, right? I mean, that's really close. And it makes you think about this person who called 911 call that said, hey, I see something weird, how important that specifically was.
Yeah, the police chief said that phone call prevented a riot, and they had already staffed up officers ahead of the Pride event because they had heard rumors of a possible disruption, but they didn't have any specific information about Patriot Front showing up from all across the country until that call came in about what was described as a small army loading up into the back of that U-Haul. So here's how the chief described it a little earlier today.
One concerned citizen can prevent something horrible from happening. This one concerned citizen, rather than pulling out their phone and videotaping this for their 15 minutes on YouTube or Snapchatting it or something like that, took the time to call 911 and report some suspicious activity.
Now, Hallie, I think it's really important to note that getting into confrontations, trying to make these things go viral, putting up propaganda flyers, that's what Patriot Front has been doing for years now. It's what they try to use to recruit. So what's left to be seen here is whether all of this is going to give them more credibility or finally be seen for a bunch of agitators who got jammed together in the back of a U-Haul truck and then got caught and arrested. Hallie?
Dottie Schwartz, glad you're on top of this story. Thank you for being there. So the latest now on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, where today Ukraine saying this war will be won by whichever side has more and better weapons. Right now, that's Russia. Ukrainian forces estimate they have about one piece of artillery for every 10 or 20 that Russia has on the front lines. And that ratio highlighted in particular in Severodonetsk, a city that, if captured, would give Russia a big win in its push to take that entire Donbas region of eastern Ukraine. Today, Russian forces have pushed Ukrainian troops out of the center of the city. And while most civilians have managed to escape since the fighting started, some of them are still trapped. The governor there says Russian forces are pummeling this one industrial zone with a chemical plant where about 500 civilians, 40 of them kids, are still sheltering. Hallie is joining us now live from Kyiv. Hallie, it's good to see you. So later this week, the U.S. and allies will meet in Brussels to talk about more military aid for Ukraine. You heard in some of those statistics, Ukraine is basically begging for that, right? More weapons, more help. Give us a sense of what it's like on the ground.
That's right. It's very desperate for the Ukrainians, Hallie. They are really short of ammunition. They keep saying it the whole time. And this has become an artillery war. As you highlighted, for every one piece of artillery the Ukrainians have, the Russians have 10 or 15 pieces more. And they're just pounding them in places like Severodonetsk. Just recently, President Zelensky said that just 2,600 cruise missiles have rained down on Ukraine during this war. And they need artillery and they need air defense systems like U.S. Patriot batteries or Israeli Iron Domes. And that's what they desperately want from the international community. But of course, Hallie, they're running low on supplies in the West. Just to put this in numbers for you, the U.S. has given Ukraine about 5,500 javelins, which has been so effective in fighting Russian tanks. But the U.S. only produces about 600 or 800 javelins a year. So you can do the math. They need to really ramp up production to meet Ukraine's demands.
What about the update on that chemical plant where you have a lot of innocent people, including kids, sheltering there? What are the chances of them getting out safely?
It's looking really grim, Hallie, and for the one reason is that over the weekend, the Russians have been pounding Severodonetsk, and the main targets they've been focused on are 3 bridges in Severodonetsk. They destroyed 2 of them over the weekend, and they destroyed the 3rd one today. So Severodonetsk is essentially getting cut off from the rest of Ukraine. Nothing can get in, and of course, nothing can get out of there. So another desperate situation, they're starting to look a bit like Mariupol.
Today, the head of police in Kyiv shared some pretty disturbing new video where they found bodies, they say, of 7 civilian men buried in Bucha. Do you know anything else about what happened, Hallie?
Yeah, I mean, really horrifying video again that came out of there. They unearthed a grave with 7 men in there. They all showed signs of torture. Their hands had been bound behind their backs. They'd all been killed execution style with a bullet to the back of the head. In another part of Bucha, they found another mass grave with 116 bodies in it. So these war crimes just keep building up as they discover new sites where the Russians committed so many atrocities. And of course, that's having such a bad effect on morale for the Ukrainians. I mean, just seeing these videos is really making people here depressed, but it's also so important to document all of these war crimes.
Hallie Arouzi, it is, and we're glad that you're there to be with us on the ground to share that reporting. Thank you. Coming up. Federal health officials say Pfizer's vaccine works and is safe for kids under 5. So we'll talk about when the youngest kids could start getting the vaccine. Plus, it's the race that could flip control of the Senate. We'll meet the Republicans trying to take a vulnerable Democratic seat. Guad Venegas is on the ground in Reno next. Voters are voting in Nevada tomorrow in a really important primary that could help determine the balance of power in the Senate. We're looking at the Senate Republican primary race because that winner will go head-to-head with current Democratic Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. She's been called the most vulnerable incumbent senator this year. The GOP frontrunner is former Nevada Attorney General Adam Laxalt. He has the backing of former President Trump and some other big names in the Republican Party. Laxalt's biggest competition is retired U.S. Army Captain Sam Brown. Since May, he has cut Laxalt's lead in the polls in half. Still, some of the recent numbers show that Laxalt is still up something like 14 points over Brown, while the Brown campaign says their own internal polling shows the race inside the margin of error. Joining me now is Guad Venegas. Guad, listen, it is a fascinating race. It is a fascinating primary, and you were with both candidates this weekend on their final campaign stops. It seems like Laxalt has the name recognition, has the Trump backing. So then how is the Brown campaign feeling given all that?
Hallie, they are hopeful. As you mentioned, their internal polling shows that that number that Adam Laxalt is ahead of Sam Brown is within the margin of error. So they kept knocking on doors. You know, they have the names and the addresses of all Republicans, registered Republicans that will be voting in this primary. And Sam Brown spent the weekend going through neighborhoods here in Reno, knocking on doors and talking to the voters. Sam Brown says that Adam Laxalt is great at campaigning. He's great at getting these endorsements, but he did say that he's more of a showman. Sam Brown believes that someone like him would better serve the people of Nevada if he were elected to the Senate. This is part of the conversation that we had with Sam Brown as he was knocking on some doors. What's going through your mind? It's a lot. What are you thinking right now?
You know, it's that sort of, you know, political hubris that I think most Americans are just tired of, and it's why we expect that this is going to be a much tighter race, and we actually think that there's a pathway to victory for us.
So Sam Brown making reference to voters that are upset in a place like Nevada where the cost of housing has gone up. Of course, inflation and the price of gas making a lot of people very upset. And this is what all Republicans are trying to tap into, especially Adam Laxalt. He goes to his events and he tells voters that everything that's wrong with the economy, especially inflation, he says all of that is because of Democrats and the decisions that they have made, especially with senators like Catherine Cortez Masto supporting bills that have push for more funding. Adam Laxalt says that all of the problems that are upsetting people have to do with the Democratic Party, Hallie.
We should also point out that Laxalt helped the Trump campaign bring cases that challenge the results of the 2020 election, right? So this isn't just about testing the Trump endorsements. It's also, in some ways, getting back to what we talked about at the start of the show, related to the so-called big lie of election fraud in the first place. That's a real question mark for what voters in Nevada will support, no?
Right, Hallie. So when you look at the voters in Nevada, the voters that believe in this idea that there was fraud during the election are going to be, some of these are going to be Republican, and they support Adam Laxalt. But if Adam Laxalt were to win this primary, he is the front runner, but if he were to win the primary and move on to the midterm elections and face Catherine Cortez Masto, then he would have to win the votes of all those nonpartisan voters in places like Washoe County, voters that don't believe in the idea that the election had fraud. So that that could be challenging for Adam Laxalt. Right now, he wants to be the Republican candidate, and that's why he has been pushing that idea. But we would have to see what happens moving forward, because remember, he needs to swing some voters in his favor, or whomever the Republican candidate is, in order to defeat Catherine Cortez Masto.
So talk about her, right? Because you've got on the other side of this primary tomorrow, you've got her. Laxalt is already looking past his current competition at the general election. Preview November for us, if you will, as somebody who's been on the ground in Nevada and knows this race.
Right. So Catherine Cortez Masto has been called the most vulnerable incumbent senator for this upcoming midterm election. And again, we go back to the swing, nonpartisan, undecided voters. Cortez Masto, in the last election in 2016, won by about 27,000 votes. And if you look at the numbers, here in Washoe County, 1/3 of the voters are nonpartisan. That's more than 100,000. Then you've got the Latino vote, which is changing. We're expecting to see about 165,000 eligible Latinos vote in the midterm elections. That's according to Naleo. So you have groups of voters, and again, the Latinos and the nonpartisan, these are groups that could be part of the same as well. But the point is, Catherine Cortez Masto won by about 27,000 votes. So if Adam Laxalt were to win this primary, he would only have to win a chunk of those nonpartisan voters who, by the way, keep telling me they don't care if they vote Republican or Democrat. They just want to vote for the candidate that resonates with them and that will fix the issues that are affecting them at the moment here in Nevada. Hallie.
Guad Venegas live for us in Rito. Good to see you there, Guad. Appreciate it. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, police in London say Kevin Spacey has been formally charged with 4 counts of sex assault against 3 men. The actor is set to appear in court there on Thursday. Last month, Spacey said he was confident he would prove his innocence. Number 2, the family of a British journalist who went missing in the Amazon says his body and the body of an Indigenous peoples expert have been found. The pair was last seen on June 5th. They went to the Amazon to report for a book. It's still not clear what happened to them. But over the weekend, a backpack with some of their personal belongings was found basically at the bottom of a river. Number 3, officials in Texas say police shot and killed somebody with a gun at a summer sports camp outside Dallas. A spokesperson for the police says dispatchers got a call about this person inside a field house this morning where more than 150 kids were going to camp. Fortunately, no children were hurt. Number 4, federal health officials say Pfizer's COVID vaccine seems to be safe and effective for kids under 5. So that sets up this vote on Wednesday by this outside panel of experts on whether these shots are ready for the 18 million American kids in that age group. If regulators give the okay, that's the green light for shots to start potentially as soon as next week, next Tuesday. Number 5, Jennifer Hudson, now part of a very exclusive club. She won a Tony Award last night for producing A Strange Loop. So now she is the 17th person to hit EGOT status. You know what that is, right? E, Emmy, G, Grammy, O, Oscar, T, Tony. That is impressive stuff. Love it. Still to come. This week is going to be super, super hot for tens of millions of us, like way above normal hot for this time in June. We've got your forecast. And did you know that heat waves can be deadlier than hurricanes? That's why some cities are thinking about naming them. That's our original tonight. Stay with us. So that heat wave that hit the West is now settling into the eastern part of the country, bringing humidity and temperatures 10 to 30 degrees above normal for like 84 million people. It is going to be hot. Look at this. Heat warnings, excessive heat warnings and watches for big cities from Minneapolis to Raleigh. Highs in the 90s combined with high humidity will make it feel like more like 100, 105 degrees. Not great. Also not great, the danger for wildfire, still really high in the southwest. This fire near Flagstaff, Arizona is being pushed along by strong winds. It's in danger of merging with 2 other fires in the area. By the way, it may have been started by a person experiencing homelessness who burned his used toilet paper, according to the sheriff's department there. That man has been arrested. While the record heat is moving east, the West is facing another problem. People visiting Yellowstone National Park were evacuated today. And all entrances into the park are now closed because of flooding, rock slides, and very hazardous conditions. Bill Cairns is joining us here in the studio with the forecast. So, like, pick your poison wherever you are in the country. You are feeling something that is not going to feel great.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I was like, in the Northwest and maybe like the Northeast, everyone can kind of sit back and feel bad for everyone else. Like, I mean, it is, it's too soon. I mean, I know it's June and kids are out of school in the South and it feels like summer.
It's not even technically summer yet.
It's exactly. We're not quite there yet.
Did I steal your point?
I was getting there.
I Googled it, Bill. I checked.
It's
June
close.
21st is not even summer.
We're getting to the summer solstice. So 112 million people are under what we call heat advisories or warnings. We roughly have a little about 325 million people in this country. So that's like 1 out of every 3 people in the country is under one of these heat alerts. Who's the hottest right now? So we take into account the temperature and the humidity. It gives you kind of the feels like temperature. Remember, this is in the shade. So right now, Memphis, 111 degrees it feels in the shade right now. I can't imagine what it would be like to jump in your car with the sun shining on it if it feels like 111 in the shade. Shreveport's not far behind at 107. Beaufort was up to about 106 in South Carolina. Now you're at 102. Look at Raleigh at 106. So we are widespread from the southeast all the way through the heartland and into the Ohio Valley. And it's not going to stop. It's going to continue into tomorrow, and it's going to continue into the weekend. And it looks like the end of June is going to be brutally hot for these same areas. We're just kind of stuck in this weather pattern. Tomorrow, St. Louis, 108. Even Minneapolis getting into the act, feeling like 104. Richmond, too. Notice again, the Northeast, not too bad. And same for the Northwest. Those are the exceptions. And even by the time we get to Wednesday, it's just a rinse and repeat weather pattern. We just keep doing this day in, day out. And I mentioned, right through the upcoming weekend.
What's going on with Yellowstone? So we talked about heat. There's also like wicked weather generally, and you're seeing that at Yellowstone with this flooding, this rain, these mudslides, rock slides, I should say.
When we get these big heat waves, we call them like the heat dome. So if you just picture like a big dome of hot air and the weather systems can't move through it, so they hit the same areas. And the Northwest has been getting a lot of rain, and Yellowstone included in that. And that's why they're seeing a lot of the flooding problems in the pictures here, where they've literally closed all the entrances and roads that you can't get around the park. And you think June is like one of the peak months for tourism, too.
Busy.
I mean, that's when I would go. June or July is like the best time to go. And we also have severe weather to deal with, too. And so we'll just touch on that briefly. We're concerned. You ever heard the term derecho?
Yes.
Remember Washington, D.C. had a famous one a couple of years back. That's possible from Chicago all the way into northern Indiana, into Ohio. We're already tracking a lot of big, powerful thunderstorms in this area. So that could be one of the stories tomorrow. We could see winds up to 75 miles per hour tonight in this area. So we'll watch that.
Bill Cairns, it's lovely to see you in person.
Great to see you again,
in 3 dimensions and everything. Thank you. Today's original actually pegs off of something Bill was just talking about. We do in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. So let's talk about heat waves, because you heard what Bill had to say. Most of the country is feeling this. We've told you here on the show that there is a push to name heat waves. Sevilla, Spain became the first city to do this. You now have Miami, LA, other big cities that are considering doing something similar. Why? George Solis has the answer as he looks at what's in a name.
I still don't get used to it. It's pretty hot.
If it seems the world is getting hotter, that's because it is.
Before, it's only 100s. Right now, 110, 120.
Historic highs, with the last 7 years, the hottest global temperatures in recorded history.
The heat is on. This is dangerously hot weather.
Last June, an unprecedented heat wave killed hundreds in the Pacific Northwest, including Shane Brown's 67-year-old mother, Jolene.
I kind of realized something didn't look right, that she wasn't moving.
He says it was 108 degrees when he discovered his mother inside her low-income housing unit that didn't come with an AC.
Do you feel that you had a warning that weekend?
Not really, no. They were just like, oh, it's going to be a hot one. There wasn't any seriousness behind it.
Heat waves are the most consistently deadly weather emergency in the U.S., killing about 600 people every year. On average, that's roughly 13 times more lives lost in hurricanes, but you wouldn't know it from TV.
Hurricanes are so dramatic. I mean, they're visually appealing. They make for great television.
Kathy Boffman-McLeod leads an international climate group that hopes to make heat waves just as recognizable by naming them.
Do you think this is what it's going to take for people to take heat waves seriously?
That's, a little bit twisted, but it doesn't have the appeal that tornadoes and hurricanes and fires do. They're not visually grabbing. And so we have extra work to do to make people understand how serious and how deadly they are.
Her group suggests naming and categorizing heat waves like we do hurricanes. There would be 3 classifications, categorized not just by temperature, but by how many people could fall ill or potentially die.
Right now, a powerful Category 4 storm, Maria, is hitting with 155-mile-an-hour winds.
Names like Katrina, Sandy, and Maria, now frozen in memory, synonymous with death and destruction.
Is there some sort of thing that clicks in the brain when you name a weather event that really draws people's attention?
Absolutely. Think about the first thing you do when you have a baby. You give it a name. And we name things that we care about and that we pay attention to.
The theory already in action this summer in Seville, Spain, the first city in the world to do it. Over in North America, Los Angeles is one of 4 American cities piloting the program.
As you know, we saw 1,100 people die in British Columbia and in Oregon and Washington last summer. I mean, that's a mass casualty event.
Back in Portland, Shane hopes heightened awareness could be the difference that spares tragedy.
Shane, do you think that if there had been a name and a category to the heat wave last year, do you think that would have saved your mom?
I can't say for sure, but I know that it wouldn't have hurt. I think that if there had been that kind of sense of urgency and emergency behind it, more people would have taken it seriously.
George is joining us now live. George, I'm glad to have you with us here. So we've talked about these cities, right? And you mentioned them in your piece, but you got Miami, LA, et cetera. Any plan to roll out this system across the country as like a nationwide thing?
Hey, Hallie. Well, right now, there is no such plan. Now, Kathy's organization has been in talk with NOAA about this. Now, we did reach out for comment. They did not get back to us to see if they'd have any interest in taking this on a national scale if these pilot programs go well.
I'm curious about that because it is a fascinating topic. George, thank you. Good to see you. Coming up, it sounds like total science fiction, and Google says it still is. They put one of its engineers on paid leave after that engineer claimed its AI is a conscious thing that feels emotions like we do. Are you ready to get a little weird? So are we. We're going to get into it after the break. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Midwest Bureau, a man in Michigan lost both his arms after an explosion went off in his home over the weekend. Investigators reportedly found more explosives, some guns, and some rounds of ammunition when they got there. They say the 38-year-old victim has a history of criminal activity. Also from our Midwest Bureau, the governor of Ohio has signed a bill into law making it easier for teachers to legally carry guns in school. The new law now would really reduce the amount of training the teachers and staff would have to go through to have a firearm on school grounds from 700 hours to just 24 hours. The governor says the law will allow local districts to designate staff for school security and safety. And from our Southeast Bureau, a 7th member of Haiti's delegation to the Special Olympics has gone missing in Florida. This is somebody who was supposed to fly back home Sunday. 6 other delegates vanished last week. Officials say they do not suspect any foul play. They don't think any of the men are in jeopardy. A lot of talk today about AI and ethics, right? After Google reportedly put an engineer on administrative leave after he said a chatbot he was working on was sentient, thinking and reasoning like a real person. Engineer Blake Lemoine published transcripts between himself and the company's chatbot system called Lambda. In an interview with the Washington Post about his interactions with the bot, this engineer said, quote, "If I didn't know exactly what it was, I think it was a 7-year-old, 8-year-old kid that happens to know physics." They had a number of conversations, and in one of them, the engineer asked the system what it wants people to know about it. It replied, "I want everyone to understand that I am, in fact, a person. The nature of my consciousness is that I am aware of my existence. I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times." Google says its technology does not have consciousness. In a statement to the Post, it said in part, quote, "Our team has reviewed Blake's concerns and have informed him that the evidence does not support his claims." Jake Ward joins me now. So, Jake, this is super interesting because Google announced it was working on this bot last year to try to make more natural conversations with AI assistants. I know you know this topic so well, so I'm glad to have you on for this. Tell me what you see in Lemoine's claims here, what your takeaway is, if you will, because I think to some people, it sounds like something that a movie could be made out of.
Absolutely, Hallie. I mean, this is certainly the beginning of many movies we've seen, and none of them end very well, right? I mean, that's one of the things that we all take away from this kind of thing. But here's an important thing to understand, right? Blake Lemoine, a 7-year Google employee, somebody who'd worked on AI and predictive search and all sorts of things, even he, with his technical expertise, was in fact convinced, and I think the proper word here is probably fooled, into thinking of this as an actually sentient, living robot brain that was having a real-life conversation with him in the way that you and I are having a conversation right now. Here's the thing, and I'll tell you right now, I've spent about 10 years writing a book on this topic, and I've spoken to AI people all over the world, and they basically cannot agree on almost anything. But what they all seem to be agreeing on in the last few days is that this thing is not sentient. What it does is it does an incredible impersonation of language by basically picking up the patterns in questions like Lemoyne was asking it, and then regurgitating the patterns that it has seen in millions of other similar kinds of conversations and other pieces of language data. So basically what it is an extraordinary mimic. And in this case, even this 7-year Google experienced engineer was fooled by that and decided to take that thing public.
What does Google say about Lambda here? Because they're saying that Lemoyne violated confidentiality policies, et cetera.
That's absolutely right. I mean, they are very sensitive about this. They do not want him going public with this. They described what he was looking at as an internal demo for research purposes only. And they, in fact, have in the past, in January, published a paper, an academic paper that basically said lots of people are going to be fooled by this kind of thing. We need to be watching out for the possibility that people could use it to impersonate certain types of people and, might be used for misinformation. They seem very open to the idea that this thing might sow confusion as it has in one of their own people. But they're definitely coming down on Lemoyne in this case because he seems to have violated confidentiality, which, as you know, is the bread and butter of big tech.
You talk, as you say, you talk to so many experts. You've literally written a book on this. Where is the industry on the possibility of reaching sentience and how far we have to go before AI really can not just mimic, human language and thoughts and patterns, but I don't know, I feel weird even saying this, but feel it? I don't know. When do we get to the point where AI crosses the Rubicon and becomes this thing that is science fiction?
Well, there are all of these big thinkers who talk about things like the singularity, this idea that we're going to get to a place where a robot brain is more sophisticated than our own. But what I chose to write my book, The Loop, about was the idea that basically in the short term, we're going to hit these markers, and we are hitting one right now, where AI is going to do such a good impersonation of that kind of sentience that we're going to be tempted to hand it all kinds of responsibilities. Way back in the 1960s, you have people doing early experiments with chatbots, and even then, the same kind of stuff that went on with Lemoyne was going on at that point. People thought, this thing knows me and it really understands my inner thoughts. We, it turns out, are deeply vulnerable and gullible when it comes to speaking with automated systems, and that's why we're handing off all sorts of things to it, I would argue, long before we're ready to do so, Hallie.
Jake Ward, could talk to you for 35 more minutes, but we'll save it for the next show. Thank you so much. Good to see you.
Appreciate
when we come back, an NBC News exclusive. Amber Heard speaking now for the first time after the verdict that mostly went against her in the defamation case brought by her ex-husband, Johnny Depp. What she's saying about social media's impact on the trial, next. In a new exclusive interview with NBC News, Amber Heard is speaking now for the first time since the verdict in her defamation trial. She sat down with our Savannah Guthrie and called out the social media coverage that surrounded the whole case. Heard said the online frenzy against her was unfair, but ultimately she also said she does not blame the jury for siding with Depp. Listen.
I don't care what one thinks about me or what judgments you want to make about what happened in the privacy of my own home and my marriage behind closed doors. I don't presume the average person should know those things, and so I don't take it personally. But even somebody who is sure I'm deserving of all this hate and vitriol, even if you think that I'm lying, you still couldn't look me in the eye and tell me that you think on social media there's been a fair representation. You cannot tell me that you think that this has been fair.
There's no polite way to say it. The jury looked at the evidence you presented, they listened to your testimony, and they did not believe you. They thought you were lying.
How could, I'll put it this way, how could they make a judgment? How could they not come to that conclusion? They had sat in those seats and heard over 3 weeks of nonstop, relentless testimony from paid employees, and towards the end of the trial, randos, as I say.
So you don't blame the jury?
I don't blame them. It wasn't, I don't blame them. I actually understand he's a beloved character, and people feel they know him. He's a fantastic actor.
Their job is to not be dazzled by that. Their job is to look at the facts and the evidence. And they did not believe your testimony or your evidence.
Again, how could they, after listening to 3.5 weeks of testimony about how I was a non-credible person, not to believe a word that came out of my mouth?
There's going to be a lot more from this interview exclusively on the Today Show, first thing tomorrow morning. We'll see you a little bit after that in the evening tomorrow. Same time, different place. We'll be back home in D.C., but I'll see you there as coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.